Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is an IFBB Pro and online coach. Today's guest is Paul Kanu. Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Hey man, thanks for having me. I think this is one of the first ones that I haven't done in a while, so I'm looking forward to see how it goes.
Yeah, for sure, man. And hopefully I got the pronunciation of your last name pretty close. I had to make sure I got that. But I am really looking forward to kind of getting to know you, Paul, and just kind of sharing your story with the BTM listeners and viewers. So the first question I kind of want to ask you, Paul, is who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time?
I don't have one.
Okay.
I know it sounds like such a boring answer, but I've never really had a favorite bodybuilder. I basically just did what I did simply because I loved it and never had to look up to somebody else to kind of portray who they are or be inspired by them.
Excellent. That's not boring. I love different. Now, let me ask this or maybe rephrase it just so we can get a little bit of information out of you. Do you remember like the first pro bodybuilder that you actually saw maybe on YouTube, Instagram, a magazine? If so, who was that?
So the first pro bodybuilder that I saw in person was Freddie Smalls. I was training at his gym in Delaware and he came up to me and then we had a workout together. I was like 13 at the time. And that was like the biggest, massive human being I've ever seen in my life.
Cool. Now, okay, so when you saw Fred Smalls at 13, what did you think? Was that something that you were attracted to? Was it something that was kind of like gross to you? Like, what were your thoughts at that age when you saw your first pro bodybuilder?
I was just like, this guy's freaking huge. He looks like a freaking wall just walking around and he's massive. And that's like, this is ridiculous. How do you look like that? And after that, it was just more of just getting to know who he is as a person. Usually when people see somebody that big, they're a little bit intimidated because of how they look and their overall stature. But being able to talk to the person themselves gives you a different perspective of who they are. He was a very nice person.
For sure. Absolutely, man. Love that. That's cool. Now, when did you actually start lifting weights, Paul? And why did you start lifting weights at that specific age?
So I started lifting weights. Well, first, I like to say I started working out around 9 or 10 years old. I was doing push-ups, pull-ups. I would do push-ups every day. I would start from 20 reps all the way down to one every single day. And I think that's basically what got my chest to develop the way that it is. Um, and then around my 10th grade, when I was in 10th grade, I started lifting for the very first time. And it was a pretty good experience. The reason why, because I still remember it to this day, is because the pump that I got from that first time actually touching weights was ungodly.
Very cool, man. Now, did you start lifting weights for sports or did you just have a weightlifting class for high school? What was the actual specific reason for starting the weight training?
So I had a few buddies of mine who were working out and they got me into it because I saw them that they're making really good progress. And I was like, okay, I want to get it on this. So I started lifting with them and then things started kind of going from there. I did it for sport at a certain point just to improve my overall speed when it comes to track and everything else that I was doing. But I genuinely was just somebody that was always in shape. So eventually it was no surprise that I ended up picking up lifting in my later years because of the challenge that it brings to me and how it improves my overall who I am as a person.
Excellent, man. Love that. Okay, so why don't you tell us a little bit about your childhood? So talk about where you actually grew up, Paul. You mentioned some sports. So what sports did you play? You mentioned track. What was your childhood like? Talk about that a little bit up to about high school, and then I've got some questions to move us on from there.
So my childhood wasn't really a normal childhood for most people. I was actually born in West Africa, 1994. And when I was about 6 or 7 years old, there was a conflict going on at the time. It was basically war at the time. Some people could call it like the Diamond War, the Blood Diamonds and stuff like that. but I was part of that when I was a younger kid. So my childhood was a little bit different than most people, but it did help me endure through a lot of struggles because I've had the highest peak of like human survival instinct that not many things tend to bother me anymore, which actually is very helpful for bodybuilding and it makes it a lot easier. Um, but I did move to the US around 2002, right after that event happened. And I was with my mom, single motherhood. So because of that, I ended up getting into lifting. And then from that point on, things just went where they are right now.
Okay, so sports. What sports did you play besides track when you were younger?
So track was my main two sport to play. I did play soccer because I was originally from Africa, so that's what we did. We played a lot of football or soccer. And I loved doing that, but then as I got into living in America, I kind of start losing interest in soccer. So after that, I ended up doing wrestling. I was also still doing track at the same time during like throughout the year. I ended up doing wrestling. I didn't really like it that much because I'm not an aggressive person, so I don't feel the desire to take part in wrestling. It was the exact same thing with football. We had a football game. Uh, my first football game, I basically had like a interception and like a home run, not home run, like a touchdown from like a 40 to 50-yard line. And then I kind of lost interest in it because I just I didn't have that desire to just want to like randomly just go hit people because I was upset or something like that. So because of that, I was just like, yeah, I'm not doing this. And I also realized that I'm more of like, I like to improve myself when I'm part of a team. I do way too much that's needed because I want to get ahead in whatever it is that I'm doing. And because of that, I just didn't really like being part of a team in school sports because most of the kids weren't really that like serious with it. So I kind of like was like, okay, forget this. And then I got into lifting, and then it's what I've been into since then.
Hmm. Okay, now when you moved from West Africa to the United States, uh, did you talk about the language barrier? Was there a language barrier? Did you guys learn English over in West Africa? Walk us through that if there was a struggle with that a bit.
So English is actually my second language. There was a bit of a struggle learning it because our language was kind of the same, but it was like a different dialect. A bunch of different words were said completely differently, and just like the what's the word? Can't think of it. But the dialect was different. But when I came here, trying to learn English was actually very, very difficult because it's a very confusing language if you speak English. It's like, why is this word mean the exact same thing as this word, but then it's spelled differently? And why are these things here? So English was very tough for me, but I did what I could to definitely learn a little bit about it and kind of just self-taught myself to speak it. One of the ways that I thought I learned how to speak English, I'm very big into anime. So during the time when I was a younger kid, I would watch Yu-Gi-Oh, but then I would basically put the caption on, and then I would just read what they were saying, and that made it a lot easier for me to pick up on the English language.
Hmm. Awesome, man. Okay, now where did you guys move when you came to the United States? Like, what state did you grow up in for the most part, Paul, or did you guys move around a lot?
So we mainly stayed in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Um, we first moved into Philadelphia, but because of how the location was and what was going on there at the time, my mom didn't really want me to be there. So we moved to a much more suburban neighborhood, which is very interesting how she pulled it off because she was very hardworking and she didn't want me to be in that particular location where I would not have a good chance of success at whatever it is that I wanted to do. So we moved to a much more suburban neighborhood, and ever since then, I kind of just been moving around in different parts of Pennsylvania till about 3 years ago when I finally moved out of PA and I settled in Texas currently right now.
Okay. Now, racism and bullying and things like that. Would you speak on that if you experienced that when you were younger, and how did that impact you at that age? And how has that impacted you as an adult? Have you had to kind of work through some of that stuff? touch on that, please, because I think that's an important topic to touch on.
It really is. So the interesting thing about racism, I was actually getting more of a racist approach from people of my own color, which was very interesting because most people are like, oh, why do you talk white? I'm like, you realize that English is my second language. I just speak it a lot better than most people, whatever. And then they were trying to think like I was trying to pretend to be white, but I'm literally from like West Africa, but I could speak English pretty well. So it was just kind of ironic and very funny. Um, Racism is one of those things where it's like I never paid attention to it, to be quite honest. Um, no matter where you are, where you're at, if you're somebody that's new to a different location, you're going to be treated differently. It's just a common fact. But you just have to kind of not necessarily bite your tongue, but find ways to do what you can to stay away from that. Like if somebody is having some racist thoughts towards you, don't entertain it. Just ignore the person and move on. That's literally all you can do. And that usually kind of shuts them up after a bit.
Mm.
I I might have experienced some quite few racism when I was younger, but then again, like I said, it's one of those things where if you're in a different location, you're always going to be treated differently because of who you are. I think racism is kind of essentially just that, people not knowing who you are, your background, and kind of base everything that you are based off of your color, but it's also because you're different from them. And also whether you're black, white, or whatever, a black person could treat you in a racist manner, a white person can treat you in a racist manner. So it kind of all goes both ways, you know?
Yeah. Did you experience any bullying then? Kind of, you know, on top of that, racism or not so much?
Bullying, not so much, because I'm usually the kind of person who just wouldn't sit down and let somebody kind of walk all over. I was kind of more of like the kid that you would be afraid of. But I mainly just, if something was going on, I'm not going to sit down and be like, okay, that person's doing this. If somebody bullied me, I'm definitely going to come back at them because I don't tolerate that shit. Even when I was younger, I still don't tolerate it till this day.
Good. Excellent, man. Now you said that you came here with your mother, a single mom. And would you talk about that a little bit? Because I'm sure that you learned work ethic from her, and I'm sure that some people might look at that situation as maybe a negative. But I think also a lot of people that grow up in a single parent home, specifically a single parent home where it's a mother, a lot of people actually look at that as a positive. And there's a lot of things that you can glean from a hardworking mom and a single parent home. So do you view it as a negative, a positive? What are some things that you actually learned from your mom, and touch on that, please, Paul?
So in terms of being part of a single mother, I kind of knew what she was going through. So I was able to tolerate whatever it was because at the end of the day, she was working really hard to help provide a roof over her head. So I didn't really think much of that. My only job at that time was to somehow be able to teach myself on how to do schoolwork, how to do my assignments, how to like make sure I'm out of trouble and do everything I can on my end to make sure like I don't give her any stress. Um, my mother was rarely ever home because she was always working all the time, 12, 16-hour shift. So I was always home by myself. And when it comes to learning in school, she wasn't very fluent in English or understood the much of like school in that sense. So I didn't really have anyone to particularly raise me to be like, hey, this is what you should do for schoolwork and stuff like that. So everything that I did growing up as a kid, I basically had to do it myself, because I'm not going to bother my mom when she's working to put a roof over her head. And if I did, it would kind of take the time away from her. So single motherhood for me, I don't really see it as a negative. I don't see it as a positive, but I just try to make best of the situation that I had at hand. I'm not one to be like, oh yeah, because I was in this situation, things are like this and this and this and that's like, if you're in that particular situation, just do what you can to change it. And that's kind of all I've been doing all my life, which ironically has led me up to this point because of that attitude that I have towards life.
Hmm. You're not a victim, right?
I don't want to be a victim.
That's good, man, because we're living in a day and age where that seems to be the go-to excuse. So it's cool to hear people that aren't taking that easy route. Now, siblings, did you have a responsibility, to care for any siblings, or were you an only child? What was that like for you, Paul?
So at first, I was an only child for about 14 years. And then on my 15th birthday, my little brother popped out of the blue. So that was very interesting. It was different because once again, my mom was always at work. Maybe the first few months when he was born, she was helping taking care of because she had to take like leave from work for a few months or so. But after that, it was kind of just us taking turn babysitting the kid. If I was working, she would take the kid to take care of him. And if she was working, I would take care of him. And we kind of just switch position back and forth. And then another year later, my little sister was born. So now I have to take care of two kids with the help of my mom helping both out, but she was also working long hours as well. And I think because of that, during that time, I started having a bit of like I wouldn't say I would say stress, but one of the ways that I learned how to deal with that was by going to the gym and focus everything that I had on that when I had the free time to do so. Because not only was my little sister born, it was also the year or two later, she had twins. So now I went from being a single child to having four little siblings that are basically I had to watch and take care of. So most of my time growing up was spent taking care of my little siblings, which I'm very proud of because of right now they're all like 14, 15, 13, 12, 12. And they all look up to me because they themselves did have a father figure. So I was able to be there to help raise them to where they had someone that they could look up to as a father figure. Because I, growing up, I didn't have a father figure in my life. So the best thing that I could do was to be there for them. So that way, when they grow up, they're in a much better position than I am.
Excellent, man. Definitely a unique childhood for sure, but I'm sure you learned so much. Now, I know you had the responsibility of taking care of your younger siblings, so this might be a little bit different for you than maybe other people, but when you were like in high school, I know you started lifting weights, and I'm sure that had a big impact on you, and we're going to get into the bodybuilding here soon. But when you were in high school or when you were younger, did you have any thoughts about a job, a career, what you wanted to do or be when you were older? If so, what were you thinking about? And then once you actually graduated high school, how did life kind of unfold for you, Paul?
So when I was maybe in middle school, I wanted to be an astronomer. I loved looking into the stars. I love reading books about astronomy. When I was younger, I would spend like hours and hours reading books about astronomy. But as I got older, I knew that I had some, I guess, differences where I'm not able to be in that position to be an astronomer, mainly because of grades and every situation that was happening at the time. So I was completely cool with that. So I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted going through high school. I had an idea because other people were saying, you should do this, you should do that. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. Because I'm very stubborn and I don't really like to have people dictate how my life is going to be. And I like to make my own life be how I want it to be. So inevitably, I kind of got into the whole lifting thing. And then that kind of led up to where I'm at currently right now, which in a sense, you could say lifting, bodybuilding was sort of like a passion of mine. And because of that, I continued on doing bodybuilding because I knew I had the potential to do really good in bodybuilding. Because I could market that off from just who I am as a person, maybe learn a little bit of information here and there to be able to help other people and create a business out of it.
Mm.
So that was kind of like the mindset. So I actually worked for a store, a convenience store for like a few years where I was going to school for free I was going to university for business administration. I went in for 2 years, but I was like, I don't like this. So the job I was working that provided me the free schooling, I ended up quitting that job because I just couldn't see myself being there for the rest of my life doing business and stuff like that. So I kind of dropped the job. I also dropped the school opportunity, which was completely free. And I just left everything in 2020. And then we'll probably get into that a little bit later, but I left everything in 2020. It was a very hard time but I made it through, and eventually I end up coming to the position where I'm at because of that one decision.
Excellent, man. Okay, so let's transition into bodybuilding talk. That's what we're all here for. Now you started lifting weights, you know, in high school. I think you said sophomore year. When did you actually begin to train like a bodybuilder? And then when did you do your first competition?
So I feel like the moment I started lifting, I started training like a bodybuilder, because that's how it always starts. You can't just go into lifting and not like train like a bodybuilder in the sense to build muscle. So the moment I started lifting, my split has always been more bodybuilding-esque. The one thing I have always tried to avoid is to train when I was younger was not to train like professional bodybuilders, mainly because they're professionals. So that's mainly that. And then what was the other question? Follow through.
When did you do your first competition?
I did my first competition in 2013 as a men's physique competitor. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. I prepped for like 4 to 6 weeks, thinking that I was going to do really, really well, and I didn't do so well. And because of that, I was like, okay, I could do a little bit better. And then I took some time to kind of learn a little bit more, gathered some information, and eventually did another show later on.
Okay, so now you said that you kind of you were training you know, like a bodybuilder from the get-go. And then you competed for the first time in 2013 in men's physique. I mean, did you prep yourself? Like, how did you get the information to step on a competitive bodybuilding stage?
So I was looking at some of the shows that they had in Philly, and I was like, I want to give this a shot. I prepped myself, but it was mainly was like I'm just gonna eat less food and then do a lot of cardio, and that's kind of what I did.
Okay. Okay. Um, so why men's physique? Why not bodybuilding?
Because I was small at the time, and I was 2 to 3 years into lifting. Men's physique was much more okay. Let me start from something where I can build off from and see where I'll be able to be in the future. Men's physique was like a stepping stone to see if it was something I wanted to do. I really didn't like it, but then like when I took that time off, Classic came in 2016.
Okay. Excellent, man. So after your men's physique competition 2013, walk us through kind of like your competition history then from that point, please, Paul.
So from that point on, I took 3 years just to kind of grow, just to put on a little bit of size without anything because I didn't really know much about anything at the time. So I got up to like 200, relatively good in that course of 3 years from like 140. And then right after that, I basically found a coach, hired a coach to help me compete in the next bodybuilding show that was in 2016, which was when Classic first was introduced. So I competed at that show called the Philadelphia Classic, and I won overall for Classic, and I also got second in bodybuilding.
Okay. Um, was the coach that you hired a local coach or a well-known coach? And how did that experience go with that first coach?
I don't ever hire coaches that are well known. I just don't. Not mainly because there's just not enough attention to details when you hire individuals like that. They mainly focus on those clients who are like their top priority and kind of just like put everyone else to the side. So the coach that I hired was some guy that was all the way in Great Britain, in England, and his name was Russell Taylor. He was my very first coach. He was very knowledgeable, incredibly smart. So I was able to learn a lot from him even till this day. And we did things more scientifically approach instead of like the regular, all right, bro, let's just smash everything and just do something stupid.
So how did you find Russell all the way over in Great Britain, you being in the United States? Was it through Instagram or walk us through that? Because that's kind of interesting to me.
It was through Facebook.
Oh,
We're part of like a lifting group called Hollywood Rabbit Cage. and he was there. So we're kind of just all like messing around, just like saying random stupid stuff about lifting or just everything in general in life. And I was like, okay, Russell seems like he knows what he's doing. I'm gonna reach out to him. Like again, like I reached out to people who are smart or they're smarter than me, never somebody who looks like they're big and jacked because they're big and jacked. So I prefer somebody with knowledge over how they look.
Okay. And I'm assuming that your time with Russell went well, and you gleaned a lot and learned a lot from him. How many competitions did you do with him?
I did two to three competitions with Russell, 2016, 2017, and I think it was 2016 and 2017. And then after that, he kind of like stopped coaching for a bit because he was kind of like losing interest in coaching. So I had to find another coach for 2018 onward.
So let's talk about finding a coach, because you're an online coach. We're going to get into that profession for you specifically here in a little bit. But because of social media and some other reasons, there's just a lot of quote unquote coaches out there, whether they're legit or self-proclaimed, whatever. But I think there's a lot of shady characters within this bodybuilding coaching, fitness coaching industry. And there's a lot of young people that don't know anything, and they're going to Instagram, they're going to social media to find a coach, and the coach is giving them a cycle. They're 17, 18 years old. They shouldn't be on a cycle at that age. There's just a lot of nonsense going on out there. So what would you suggest, Paul, for somebody that wants to get a prep coach? They want to get into competing. How do they find the right coach or a good coach? Are there some words of wisdom that you can give that listener or viewer in terms of finding a coach?
In terms of finding a coach, you definitely have to do your research on the coaches that you're trying to like get. Don't go based off how they look, because sometimes people who are professional bodybuilders might have gotten to the point of their bodybuilding career throughout genetics and drugs. And you don't want to rely on individuals like that, because if you were to get a coach like that, they will give you the exact same routine that they used that's not specifically tailored to you. So that's one thing, is to make sure the person that you are being coached by is someone that's knowledgeable. Don't focus on their overall physique as a main, I guess, as a main point to like get into their coaching. The one thing that I tend to value the most, if I'm looking for an online coach and I'm going to pay them a lot of money, they better get on the fucking phone with me. Because if you're not willing to get on the phone with me to talk to me about my plans, my nutrition, my diet, and I'm going to pay you a lot of money, that's a red flag. Because honestly, you can just give somebody money and then they're just going to send you a copy and paste routine that's not specifically designed to you. So if they're able to sit down with you for the consultation where they're talking to you and they're making sure that like they're putting notes in for your plans and stuff like that, that's a coach that's worth having, because they're willing to take that time out of their day to actually talk to you and understand what your needs and wants are, instead of just giving you a random routine. So definitely that would be like the first thing a lot of people should really consider, because nowadays we have the social media platform where people just put like their links to their coaching, they fill it out, but then like the person, you never really talk to the person, you just fill stuff out. I feel like that's a big red flag, because you don't know what you're getting. You don't know who the person is. You don't know how they work. You don't know how to communicate with anything. But because you think they look good, you're just going to be like, I want that coach. And I don't care if I never get on the phone with them. So that's definitely one of the big things that bothers me a lot. And for anyone that's looking for a coach, if you're going to pay a lot of money to someone, they better have a phone call with you.
Yeah. Now, I've asked that question a lot to guests on the podcast. Something that comes up a lot in terms of finding the right coach or a good coach. And I think it's great words of wisdom. And I'd like to kind of get your opinion on this too, Paul. A lot of people say, try to reach out to some of the coach's clients and ask them, you know, whether they're a current client or former client, like through social media, especially through Instagram. It's hard not to find information out if you really want to find it out. So a lot of people, athletes and other coaches say, hey, get a hold of you know, current clients, former clients, ask them about that coach, and that's going to really give you a lot of information about what you're going to get yourself into with that specific coach. Do you feel like that is a good route to take if you're looking for a coach?
Yes, because you're being responsible.
Cool.
That's the only reason.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I want to ask you this also in regards to PEDs. Do you have like a specific age that you would prefer somebody not to start taking PEDs, or before that age, or certain amount of time training? Like, what's your philosophy on that?
So I want everyone who's considering PEDs to train naturally for as long as they possibly can before making that decision. Once they're done training naturally and they're about to make that decision, I also would like them to take some time to think about 10, 15 years down the road and what they're trying to achieve with their enhancement. Is it going to be worth it? Because you won't really know the true side effects of performance enhancement drugs till 10, 15, 20 years down the road. So you have to like plan that long ahead to make sure that you are doing it for that time frame, and then you can get yourself out to where you're not having to any other health ramification. And when it comes to like PED wise, from going from a natural person to like thinking about enhancement, once you've calculate out that 10 to 15 years of what you're willing to sacrifice in terms of your overall health and time to get to that position that you're looking to get 10, 15 years down the road, then you can make a decision of what you're going to do. But whenever you're about to do stuff like performance enhancement drugs for somebody who's switching to natural, start with the most minimal amount that you can do, but make sure to check all your boxes with your nutrition, your sleep, your stress, your environments, and everything else in there. Make sure your training is also on point, because sometimes people get on enhancement with little to no training experience. But if you're natural and you've trained naturally for a long period amount of time, you have an ample amount of experience to be able to transfer that over towards your enhancement prospect once you're ready to take that dive.
Excellent, man. Okay, we're going to come back to coaching with you specifically, but let's get back into your competition history. I think we left off at 2018. So after 2018, what did your competing look like?
What do you mean?
So you talked about your last competition in 2018. After 2018, when did you compete? Where did you compete? Where did you get your pro card? Talk about that, please.
Okay. So I did another show in 2018. It was the Pittsburgh Championship. So the first show, the 2016, I won overall. The 2017, I got second, and I actually lost to a natural bodybuilder, which to this day still irks me, because after he competed that year, he never competed ever again, and it still makes me very angry. Um, but he ended up actually going to like nationals and beat everyone there naturally, got his pro card and never competed again. Still makes me angry, but that's besides the point. um, so I had a different coach in 2018. His name is Scooby Prep. So Jason Theobald was my coach at the time. Once again, I pick coaches based on how knowledgeable they are. Jason at the time was a very knowledgeable individual, and most of these coaches that I'm getting, I already knew them from my Facebook at the time, and we did pretty well at that show. I think that was probably like the biggest that I've ever looked at 182 on stage. So it was the first time where I did a competition and I placed seventh in classic. But and then I got like second or third in bodybuilding. So I was kind of like in between the line of like, okay, is this really worth it doing two different divisions at the same time? Because if you can't really focus on one particular division and then give your focus to another one. So it's like divided. So after that year on, I was just like, okay, I'm not doing bodybuilding anymore. It's not necessarily I like the look of classic, but I want to do classic because I I liked having that weight cap at the time, because during that time I didn't want to get like ridiculously big. I never wanted to get ridiculously big. So I did a show in 2019, which was the North Americans. So here's where a lot of people tend to get it all screwed up. Back in the day, people were just like competing and competing because they love to compete. It was never about like, I want to get a pro card. I want to get a pro card. I want to get a pro card. When I did my shows, it wasn't about like, okay, I'm going to get a pro card. That was never the intention. I never once thought about getting a pro card as part of me competing. I competed because I genuinely love to challenge myself against other people and push my body to its limits. Whether I get a pro card or not, it didn't matter to me at the time because I love the competition. And one of the reasons why I did North America is, ironically, it was 2019 that I found out there was something called nationals. So I've just been doing shows after shows just to beat other individuals at like higher level of the competition. And then I was like, okay, I'm ready to go do nationals in 2019. So I did nationals in 2019. I got third in nationals, a place away from winning my pro card, mainly because at that time I kind of like screwed myself up because I binge ate a lot going towards the show. So I had to pull a bunch of stuff up, but I was still relatively lean. But because of that particular time frame, I didn't really like how that ended up. So I was a little bit disappointed in myself. So there was also the reasons why I didn't win, but whatever. I was a little bit disappointed in myself. So I was like, okay, you know what I'm gonna do? When I compete next year in 2020, I'm going to come in so freaking incredible that you cannot overlook me, that you cannot like place me anything less than first. So I did exactly just that. Came in. The interesting thing about that is like the moment that I walked into the hotel, people just knew I was going to get my pro card. It was just like, yeah, man, good luck with your pro card. Just like, good luck with your pro card. I was like, okay, I don't know who you are, but cool, thanks. So I just continued. And then leading up to that 2020 show, it was a very interesting last 2 to 3 weeks of prep because during that time, my apartment building burned down and I didn't have a place to stay. It was when I actually met my girlfriend, now my wife, who basically was there to support me. She drove me all the way down to South Carolina. I think that's where it was that time during COVID. So she drove me all the way down there. She supported me. But the last 2 weeks of that prep was very, very difficult, mainly because of outside factors. Didn't have a place to stay. I was also driving about an hour and a half a day just to go work at a gym because everything was closed during that time. And I'll drive an hour and a half back just to go to another job just to work that. And then I would get maybe like 2 to 3 hours of sleep throughout that last 2 weeks. So a lot of stress, a lot of inflammation built up leading up towards that particular show. The last week of the show, I had to pull like 15 pounds, which I did. So I had to starve myself for like 72 hours because I was just in that moment where it's like, okay, I got to do this. So I basically starved myself for 72 hours to drink any water, pull all the weight down, came in about like 172, 173. And I went in there, even with all that was going on at the time, I went in there and I beat 33 people. And I got first and I got my pro card.
Cool. And I'm sure that was a very very good feeling, right? Now, was that at nationals or USA's or which competition was that?
Universe 2020.
Okay, Universe. Okay. So walk us through that. When you got your pro card, what were some of the feelings and the emotions, Paul, that you experienced at that point?
I wanted food.
Okay.
I'm very
expound a little bit more, my man.
no, I literally just wanted food. I'm very nonchalant about the pro card status. I got the pro card. Cool. Let me eat some food. Because at that point, it didn't really matter to me because I got what I came there for. I wasn't like super excited. I was more of like, oh, thank God this is finally over. Even when we were at the finals, Callum Von Monger was like there, and we were just like, I'm just like, all right, guys, I don't care about this anymore. So let's do what we can to make sure Callum doesn't win and gets the overall. And he didn't get the overall. So that was kind of like the main thing. Like, I got my pro card. I wanted food. It sounds so boring and so plain. There was like no like, oh, woohoo, I got my pro card kind of thing. Because to me, it was never about the pro card. It was more about being competitive.
Yeah. Okay, so what did you eat then? If you were just wanting food, what did you slam down?
Uh, a lot of Kit Kats
Okay.
and 3 boxes of pizza, some buffalo chicken wings, like a lot of buffalo chicken wings. I have like a photo of my friend and I were just like eating. We have like 3 to 4 boxes of pizza on the bed, and we're freaking eating. And then there was a lot of food there. Got a little bit sick, but I was like, okay, cool. I wanted my food.
Yep. Okay.
But I was
Okay.
craving chocolate.
All right. Who coached you for that competition?
So the guy that coached me was a guy named Zach. I'm trying to figure out his last name, but he's a natural bodybuilder who competed before, but then he stopped competing. But I basically was coached by him for about the last, I guess, two years, leading towards the um the universe. So I was coached around for like 2 years. Ironically, I never once got on the phone with him, never like talked to him about anything. We just texted. And after him coaching me for 2 consecutive years, the first time I got him on the phone was when I won my pro card. So that was a very interesting relationship. He was a cool dude, great coach. I learned a lot from him actually. And I would say he was probably one of the best coaches I've ever had. And he's not a big name guy.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. So let's talk a little bit before we talk about your pro debut and your future plans as an IFBB pro, Paul. Why don't we talk a little bit about when you started coaching and walk us through a little bit about your online coaching. Who do you coach? Just chat about that for a couple minutes, please.
Yeah. So before I became an online coach, I was personal training for 5 to 6 years. So I was personal training from 2015 to 2020. I love training people just so I can kind of fix their mistakes, make sure they get in the right cues. I actually love to do that more than I do online coaching. So if I ever get a chance with clients where like they need to come in and come with me for like coaching or in-person training, I'll do it with them. But the main reason why I stopped personal training is because I just didn't think people took it seriously. So I was like, okay, well, I'm spending all this time and effort to make these people better, but they're not really being, I guess, generous of my time and effort. And then because of that, I kind of just left doing that. So before I became an online coach, I spent an extended amount of years during those personal training period time to learn about training, learn about nutrition, applying certain things to myself, and then being able to apply it to some of the clients I had for my in-person personal training. And I still develop my I guess my education piece of bodybuilding throughout the years. I didn't really fully decide to coach anyone till 20 till 2021. And that was the time when Fit Body Fusion reached out to me. I actually got reached out by Terrence Ruffin was just like, hey man, we're putting a group of coaching team together for like the men's side. I'd like you to be part of it. So I was like, okay, cool. So Terrence brought me on board for Fit Body Fusion, and I was coaching clients prior, maybe like a few months prior. But then when I got on with Fit Body Fusion, that's when I really started getting into like coaching people for competitors and stuff like that. I never really put anyone on stage, mainly because I wasn't confident in my ability to put people on stage till maybe a year later. So what I did was just build them up, learn a little bit more about prep and stuff like that. And then 2021 was when I started putting people on stage. And I got a lot of good placing for some of my clients.
Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier that something about 2020, kind of where you went all in or something like that. You said we'll probably get to that later. What were you referring to about that earlier in our conversation, Paul?
I was mainly just discussing about like the building burning down and then me basically just doing what I could to kind of get myself to that position to get where I'm at, because I knew how important that was for me, because at that moment I didn't have anything. And because I didn't have anything, I had no other reason. I wanted to win, because I knew if I won, that could potentially help me in wherever it is I'm trying to go. And it ended up doing exactly just that. And then which eventually brought me up to where I'm currently at right now because of that particular competition that I did in 2020.
Excellent, man. So you do feel like having that IFBB Pro before your name, business-wise, has helped you in terms of getting more clients, getting more opportunities, making more money. Is that a fair statement or not?
Um, it depends. The title of having a pro card or IFBB Pro status doesn't necessarily get you what people think it does until you actually put the work into it. Because I'm sure we have a bunch of IFBB pros who are not coaching people or not doing anything. All they do is post pictures themselves, but never really offer any information of knowledge towards their particular population of followers or people that follow them online. So when I see stuff like that as an IFBB pro and you're supposed to be giving values to people, but instead you're just giving them physique update of like how you look. Yeah, I get it. You're a pro. But like at the end of the day, it just doesn't really show people who you are. So for me, yes, the pro card helped in a sense, but it helped in a sense it got me with Fit Body Fusion to be able to help coach more clients because they're a much more prestige coaching team. But ultimately, it came down to how I marketed myself, how I provided information to people, what I did to help people online, the advice that I gave people. That was basically what brought me most of my clients. And also, generally, just being myself and not trying to be anything different. My thing is like, I wanted to help people learn. So I did exactly just that.
Hmm. So let's get a little bit more into the business side of things, because this is something that appeals to a lot of the people that are in the BTM community. A lot of people are wanting to be pros and wanting to be online coaches like yourself. So I like to provide value if we can through our conversations. So on the business side of things, let's talk about Instagram specifically. How have you utilized Instagram to build your coaching business, specifically the online coaching business?
So when it comes to Instagram, I think of it as like my own personal space and I can do whatever I want. This is also one of the main reasons why I don't have a lot of like people sponsoring me because I feel like that takes away a lot of my freedom that I can do, that I can give and provide people. And ultimately, if I make my money through coaching, I wouldn't really need the support of a sponsorship because that's how I make my money. But in terms of like the coaching business, like honestly, when it comes to that, you just give people value. Give people value to make them want to be better. And if they're looking to be better from what you give them, that's valuable. And because of that, they'll stick around and just generally just being yourself. No need to have these like, oh, I'm a bodybuilder, I'm going to war kind of crap. I think that's childish, especially when I'm somebody who's been part of a war. It's a little ridiculous when I hear a grown ass man who just go to the gym in a freaking air conditioned gym with like TVs and everything, and they're all hardcore. It's like, dude, you're just lifting weights in a very air conditioned location. Um, so stuff like that is one of those things that you shouldn't really do just to get clients, but show who you are as a person and then provide value to people and help people as much as you can. Yes, occasionally you can show your physique off here and there, but use it as a marketing tool to help increase your business. Because if people see somebody that looks amazing, yes, they're going to pick them, but they don't want to, you don't want them to just pick you because of just how you look. Because the way you look, you might just get there because you have freaking amazing genetics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, the way we look is a very temporal thing, right, Paul?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so what is your long-term business goal in terms of coaching? At some point, would you like to have coaches underneath you? At some point, would you like to transition into owning your own gym and not doing any type of coaching, or get into other type of business endeavors? What's the long-term goal or vision for yourself at this point, Paul?
So at some point, I'd like to have some coaches under me. I'll also like to compete at the highest level of bodybuilding, but not because I want to be Mr. Olympia, but because it helps promote my business. Um, I'm actually going to be stopping the entirety of the whole bodybuilding competition at 34, mainly because that was the plan that I set for myself for my 10, 15-year goal. I basically got most of what I could potentially get out of everything for the last 10 something years. So now it's kind of like moving away from that and focusing more on the family aspect of it and actually the business aspect. Because for me, I love to bodybuild because I love to be competitive, but I also don't want to be in a position where I am sacrificing my health to bodybuild to be able to take it to the higher level for an extended period amount of time when I have a family to provide for, when I have people to take care of, when I have friends to take care of. So I'd rather focus on those and make most of my business be coaching people once I reach at the highest level of the sport, coaching people get into that exact same level to where now I just have fun with my family. Don't worry about doing bodybuilding, but just focus on making people get to their particular goal. Because to me, being able to have a client compete and then do really well, there's a certain feeling that comes out of that when the client does an amazing job and they're excited that you help them, you guide them through their journey. And that is a lot more valuable to me than winning the Olympia.
Hmm. Awesome, man. Love that. Now, since we're at that point, you have your first child of your own. I know you took care of some of your younger siblings for several years. You talked to us about that, but you have your own child on the way. Why don't you talk about that? How excited are you guys for? I believe you said before we turned on, it's going to be a boy. So, how exciting is that?
I am super excited to have him around because it'll be my own kid, but also at the same time, we get to watch anime together. It's like I'm a very simple guy. It's like I have a kid, we watch anime, we do everything together, and that way, when they grow up, they're in a much better position to kind of like be better in life. Like I want to be there for them because I know growing up, I didn't have anyone to be there for me. So being able to have my own kid, and which is one of the reasons why I was like, okay, coaching works, and then not doing bodybuilding after like 34 works because now I could spend that time raising my kid and not have to worry about like, oh, I got to go to the gym, I got to do this, I got to do this contest prep, I got to do all that stuff, I got to spend all this money. But I got to focus on raising my kid while making sure I have all the financial benefits that financial needs that I have where they need to be. But I'm super excited. I'm actually very excited to see what he's going to look like more than anything. That's pretty much it.
Um, what's do you guys got any names picked out, or is that all under wraps at this point, or still in the works?
Yeah, we do. So my wife is Polish, and she wanted a very international name. So we decided to go with Lukas, and the middle name is Edward, and his last name would be Paul Kanu. Um, so Lukas Edward Kanu. That will be his full name.
Cool. What's his first name mean? Do you guys know that information?
Um, we don't know. That's what the wife picked out. The mother picked out that one. I was like, okay, you can have that because it's international, but let me have the middle and the last name. I don't care
There
about
you
the
go.
first.
There you go. Cool, man. And when is he? When's the due date?
He is due in June 22nd. He might be here later or earlier than that, but somewhere around that time frame.
Cool, man. That's exciting news. Now, let's start wrapping things up here, Paul. You kind of already mentioned, like, you want to be done at 35 in terms of competing. How old are you at this point?
28.
28. Okay. So we've got about 7 years, give or take. Now, you said you want to compete at the highest level, and that was more for the business aspect of things. You made your pro debut at the Hurricane Pro. I saw that on your Instagram. What year was that? And then have you competed at any other competitions outside of the Hurricane Pro or not?
That was the year 2021. I actually, once I started competing in 2016, I never took an off season. So I basically just went through 2016 all the way till 2020, got my pro card about 3 to 4 years later. And then I competed the Hurricane Pro in 2021 as the first pro debut. And then 3 to 4 weeks later, I competed at the Texas Pro AM show, where I got seventh. I got fifth at the Hurricane Pro. And then a week or two later, I competed at the Atlantic Coast in Florida and I got fifth. That was very exhausting, exhausting contest prep. A lot of different shows back to back. And it was at that point when I was like, okay, I'm never doing multiple shows ever again, especially when they're so close by. And finally, once that 2021 season was over, I finally get to actually have an off season. And I've used every single minute of it. And I am bigger, I am leaner, I look more symmetrical, more proportional than ever. It was just a off season that I needed because I've never had one.
So you took last year off. What is the game plan then for stepping back on stage this year in 2023? And then who's coaching you if you have a coach going into this season?
So the game plan for 2023 was to compete at the Fit World Pro, which is about 2.5 weeks from now. And then my coach is Marsha, who's currently works with Team Evil GSP, Broderick Chavez. I met Broderick back in 2018, but never had the opportunity to like sit down with him and talk about coaching until I guess last year, 2022. And we sat down and created a plan. And it's been going really well. This off season has been very, very tremendous because leading up towards my contest prep, I took a pretty good off season where I wasn't being coached by anyone because the previous coach that I had before was just horrible. Not going to name any names. But the way that he did things wasn't really the way how I wanted it to be. My Hurricane Pro debut, I actually didn't like that look at all because I knew I could have been better, but because I wasn't in a position where I needed to be better, I was like, okay, screw this, take a year off, and then see how things go. But this year, I'm more confident in my physique than I've ever been because the way it looks, I've kind of built it how I wanted it to be. And all I had was just somebody to guide me along the way, a coach, and that's what they're there for.
Hmm. So you're about 2 weeks out then from stepping back on stage. Is that what I heard?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what was your focus in your off season in terms of body parts that you wanted to bring up, or I'm assuming it was like most bodybuilders overall size. But what was your main focus last year in that off season? And what are some of those areas that you brought up? And I know you mentioned you really like the way you're looking. What's your goal when you step on stage in 2 weeks? So talk about off season last year. What did you bring up? What did you do? What did you accomplish? What's your goal going into this competition in 2 weeks?
Off season last year, I was focused on improving my upper body. My legs are very dominant. I could go 2, 3 months without training legs. They will still have their size. I actually stopped training legs about 4 weeks ago, just to kind of like get all the inflammation down because they never really need much. But I focused more on my upper body. My back was the primary focus because in 2021, when I competed, I was so flat, so deflated. And I've always had a big back, but because of the way that the coaching protocol was going, it didn't really create that room to get my back where it needed to grow. So I basically took everything under my own control during my off season because I'm pretty smart and I know how to train a lot more than most people. So I basically just did just that, just created my own routine, followed it through, brought up my back, brought up my arms, brought up my shoulders, brought up my hamstrings, brought up my calves. So everything currently right now is very proportional in size compared to my weight and symmetrical with everything else.
Okay. And so your goal in 2 weeks at this competition is what?
My goal in 2 weeks, I kind of already won because my goal was to improve. Now it's just go out there and see how I stacked up against other people. I don't have like this grandiose goal to just be like, I'm gonna go there and win. Because at the end of the day, I like the competitive aspect of it, but I've controlled everything that I could potentially control outside of the stage. That if anything goes completely wrong during the stage, that's out of my control. All I have to do is just like pose, stay on my diet, get lean, get myself ready. But once I step on that stage, everything is completely out of my control. So I can't really say I'm going to go there and win because I like to be more realistic and honest in my approach. Could I win? Maybe. Could I not? Maybe. But at the end of the day, I'm pretty happy because I got a wife, I got a kid, I have a family going, I'm doing pretty good with my business. Bodybuilding for me is kind of just a hobby.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a very healthy, outlook because like I mentioned earlier, our bodies are temporary. Competing as a bodybuilder, especially on the enhanced side, is very temporal. So I really appreciate that perspective, Paul. Now, as we wrap things up, I want to ask you, what do you feel like bodybuilding has taught you, or what do you feel like bodybuilding has given you?
Bodybuilding has taught me one thing. To get to where you need to be, you have to do the work that needs to be done. No ifs, ands, or but. If you don't do the work that needs to be done, you're not going to get to where you need to be. The only person that you can blame because you didn't get to where you need to be is yourself because you didn't do the work.
I like it, man. I like it. Let's stop right there because I think that's a very powerful, words of wisdom that you just shared. So let's stop there, Paul. We touched on a lot of topics. I think we've got a pretty full breadth of your story. Before I do a quick outro and I let you go, why don't you give us your Instagram? If somebody wants to connect with you in terms of, inquiring about coaching, if it's Instagram that they need to find you at, let us know. Or if you have a website, any shout outs, anything that you want to leave with us in closing, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'll do an outro and that'll be a wrap. So floor is yours, Paul.
All right, sounds good. So I currently don't have a website, but I'm working on that. But you can follow me on Instagram at Kanu Lift, KANULIFT. And if you're looking for coaching or something like that, you can go on the fitbodyfusion.com website and request Paul Kanu for coaching. And like I said, I'll pick up the phone, call you, sit down with you for 30 to 45 minutes, talk about your goals, your wants and needs, and then basically just whether you decide to work with me or not, we'll make the plans here and there where we're still on the phone communicating. And that's pretty much it. Not much of any websites or shout outs or anything like that.
Since you're such an anime individual, I don't know what word to really say. What's a couple of your go-tos for what you like to watch in terms of anime?
I'm getting a lot more into isekais. They're more like where you travel to another world if you die or anything like that. I'm big into action like anime, a lot of like mysteries. I recently just finished Summertime Rendering, which is a really good anime. Kind of love that a lot. I don't know, man. My anime lists, the ones that I've watched over the years, is a lot longer than most people. It's hard for me to pick a particular, like, if there's not a single anime out there that I haven't watched. It's just
Cool.
not.
Love it, man. That's a beautiful thing about bodybuilding. There's a lot of unique, different, fun stories out there and individuals, and that's super cool. So, Paul, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast, sharing your life story with us, sharing your bodybuilding story with us up to this point. There's still, God willing, a lot more years for both of your stories to go, but I really appreciate you coming on. Okay.
Likewise, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, you're welcome. All of you who are tuning into another episode of Behind the Muscle Podcast, I just want to say thank you so very much. If you guys have not done so already, please make sure you hit that subscribe button in regards to Behind the Muscle Podcast on YouTube. And then also, please take this episode with Paul, share it on your Instagram stories. Make sure you tag Paul, tag Behind the Muscle Podcast so that we know that you listened specifically to this episode and found great value in it, in which I know you did. And then finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.